Hello, hello. Someone asked a really good question in a comment under one of my videos. The video is called, where is the video? It is a guided meditation, and it's called A Portal to the Unknown, a guided meditation. It released on October 9th, 2025. So the comment that someone left was kind of long. I will probably shorten it a little bit, but you'll get the gist pretty quick. And I thought it was a great comment. Instead of answering directly in the comment section, I just thought I would answer it publicly because it's a good question. A lot of people have this kind of question. This is from username Closed Minds, Never Open Doors. I like that. Let's see here. It says, what do you mean by, quote, there is no knower of experience, end quote? Of course, there is no individual self, but what we are is the unlimited, ever-present knowing. In fact, that's what we are, is knowing or awareness itself. I think people get confused because they hear people say, those who know nothing, and think it means those who know just don't know anything, as if there is no truth or recognition. The recognition is to recognize, oh, I am this awareness, the knowing in which all appear. We recognize ourselves as knowing, but in that moment, we don't know what we are, as in an object or person. Hence, knowing itself isn't an object or a person, and as just knowing, you aren't labeling this or that. Okay, it does go on and on. I read it kind of slowly because I wanted to let it land for whoever's watching or listening to this. You get the gist probably. Okay, so a couple of things I want to say to the person who wrote it and anyone who feels this way, like who has this insight, who for you, this insight is so completely obvious. It's sort of self-validating, as I describe in my book. The First Awakening is self-validating. And if this is self-validating and self-obvious to you, great, awesome. Usually that means you've had a shift, you've had an awakening. And then I will suggest something. The suggestion is, are you open to anything beyond what you already have realized? The reason I say it that way is, I think I mentioned it in my book at some point, that there's something about realization where no matter what, certainly after the first shift, certainly after an awakening, after Kensho, no matter what, in what way we encounter reality, it just rings true. It is reality. Like there's not more or less of reality, right? You know that. You instinctually know in your viscera, in your bones, in your marrow that reality is reality. Yeah. How could it become clearer? How could it be more clear than this? So that flavor of truth, that resonance for truth is beautiful. It's never wrong. It's true. And there are relative refinements to the one's insight in reference to that. This is a bit of an aside, but this is why I do talk about things in terms of stages. Some people really don't like that. They really don't like the idea of stages. Well, too bad, because there are stages. There are degrees of insight. There just are. And they're pretty obvious. I think once you've traversed this and gone into deep realization and really looked and confronted those fixations and they've dissolved and the perceptual filters have dissolved and the shadow work has settled, like this becomes pretty obvious, actually. It's not like an opinion. It's the people I know who have clear, non-dual and no self-realization would agree on these points in their direct experience, right? So there are stages to things. The way this description is pointing is very clear, actually. It's a very clear description, this comment. And the stage of realization, the insight itself, would be called one mind. It's very common. It's very, very common for people who've had an initial shift to kind of land at this one mind insight. I'm not going to name teachers or names or anything, but you can see it around. It's very, very common, both in the world of philosophers who have had shifts and they point this way. Some that even borders on a little bit of like new agey manifestation stuff, kind of borders in this space. Others that are more like more traditional Advaita Vedanta can be in this space of this realization coming forward as very obviously the case. This is it, right? And there's something about it, this eternal witness, this vastness of awareness, this knowing without a knower, but pure knowing. I'm going to point to the knower. I'm going to point to the without a knower, but the insight is that there's a universal knower, that there's no individual knower, no, but there is the universal knower that's sort of aware of everything, right? It is self-aware and it is aware, and it is, maybe it has no, you could even say it has no qualities, it has no particular formation, has no limitation, it has no center, no boundaries. All that's true of it, and it is a kind of infinite knowingness, yeah? And maybe in Dzogchen would be called Rigpa, consciousness Rigpa. So, man, there's so many things I could say about this, but I'll quote a couple people. Adyashanti has pointed this out many times, and he says, what many people consider to be non-duality is not non-duality. It's that you've boiled reality down to a very clear and distinct fundamental duality, and that's awareness and everything else. And that's exactly the insight of one mind. That's what it is. It's not wrong, but it's not finished. There is more to see. There is more to realize. And I know it doesn't feel dualistic. It does not feel dualistic. But what I will tell you is this is why I point to this whole process being about identity, because you have to actually start to really get to the root of what identity is about and how it's functioning to see through this. Because otherwise it feels very real. It feels very final. Like it feels very, like what else could there be but awareness? Like it's all awareness, right? And I will say that, yeah, if you don't really start to inquire into the nature of identity itself, this will elude you. I'm going to quote someone else. I think I've read this whole thing in a video. It's really good. It's called The 7 Stages of Insight by a person named Thusness, who remained, I've offered him to be interviewed, but he's a little shy still, but I think I'll get him sooner or later, maybe 10 years from now. Anyway, his insights are really clear, and he wrote this beautiful thing. It's in Awakening to Reality. But I'm just going to read a very small part of it. And he has this sort of 7 stages that he breaks things down into. Stage 5 being anatta in all aspects. Stage 4 being non-dual realization. So just for context. But stage 4, he calls presence as mirror bright clarity. It says, I got in touch with Buddhism in 1997, not because I wanted to find, and by the way, this person has already had an awakening, has already had an initial shift, and has already had some erosion of the sense of an individual I. So I got in touch with Buddhism in 1997, not because I wanted to find out more about the experience of presence, but rather the teaching of impermanence synced deeply with what I was experiencing in life. I was faced with the possibility of losing all my wealth and more to financial crisis. At that point in time, I had no idea that Buddhism is so profoundly rich on the aspect of presence. The mystery of life cannot be understood. I sought for a refuge in Buddhism to alleviate my sorrows caused by the financial crisis, but it turned out to be the missing key toward experiencing total presence. This is the part I really want to point out. See if this can land for you. Feel into this. I wasn't that resistant then to the doctrine of no self, but the idea that all phenomenal existence is empty of an inherent self, or self with a capital S, did not quite get into me. Were they talking about the self as a personality, or large S self as eternal witness? Must we do away with the witness? Was the witness itself another illusion? So, to cut to the chase, the witness is an illusion. It is a total illusion. This is exactly what I was pointing to in the video. There is no knower behind experience. There's no knower behind the known. That's duality. That's the fundamental duality, is the sense that there's a knower behind experience, that there's an awareness of, apart from anything. Again, it can feel like, well, there's just awareness, so there's no duality there. But if you look closely at your experience, you're experiencing awareness as apart from everything, physical experience, physical objects, right? You have to really question that mechanism of witnessing and look really, really close. Is that apart from, I have many videos pointing to this, but is that apart from the sensation itself? I mean the actual sensation, the actual sound itself. Look and see, because when you're experiencing that universal witness, you're gonna, it's so stark. The duality is so stark that you may not even recognize its duality until you really see it. See that awareness is not apart from the sound. It is none other than the sound itself. There is no witness. There is no knower of experience. Very obviously, with non-dual realization. Now, with one mind realization, there is. And that will collapse. And that's exactly what he's talking about here. Then he goes on and he has a stanza here, which is beautiful. There is thinking, no thinker. There is sound, no hearer. Suffering exists, no sufferer. Deeds there are, no doer. I was meditating on the meaning of the above stanza deeply until one day, suddenly I heard, it's a bell sound, tong. It was so clear. There was nothing else, just the sound and nothing else. And tong, resounding. It was so clear, so vivid. That experience was so familiar, so real, and so clear. It was the same experience of I am. It was without thought, without concepts, without intermediary, without anyone there, without any in between. What was it? It was presence, but this time it was not I am. It was not asking who am I. It was not the pure sense of I am. It was tong, the pure sound. Anyone who has heard this knows this is a big difference. This is a huge difference. It's a huge shift in perception. It's a huge release in binding to what I'm going to say is like universal consciousness, witness state, watcher state. You don't realize how unnatural that actually is until it collapses. And when it collapses, it's such a relief. It's such a pure experience. It's such a pure experience. It's so beautiful. I use the word intimacy for this a lot, but I don't have a good word for it. But he's describing it well. I have a video where I interviewed Tony. It's called A Warrior Awakens or A Warrior's Awakening. It's a very good video. He talks very clearly about when this happened for him. Beautiful. So yeah, if you're interested in this and you want to explore that there is something beyond what you've realized, check it out. Check out my, well, if there's reactivity, the Fetter 4 and 5 videos, but you can look at the non-duality playlist. I have a whole non-duality playlist where I go over and over and over different ways of investigating exactly this. So again, if you're satisfied with where you are with that insight, that's great. I'm not going to tell you that's wrong. It's fine. If you're curious about another possibility, something deeper, I will tell you two things. One is be prepared that there may actually be some shadow material in the way this can be a painful thing to transition out of, because it is actually compartmentalizing your experience more than you realize. On the other hand, there's some really good news if you're interested in deeper insights. So that's that. So I've quoted a couple people. I will quote myself as well. I have a video that I point to a lot with this. It's called The Awareness Trap. Check out The Awareness Trap. And so yeah, I'll just point directly to this that I'm saying is like, in experience, things get so incredibly simple that it's exactly what now I'm going to quote Buddha. It's exactly what the Bahia Sutta says. In the seen, there is only the seen. In the heard, there is only the heard. It is that clear. It's really that way. There's no one experiencing anything. There's no awareness experiencing anything. The quality of awareness itself is the sound. I can't say any more clearly than that. The quality of awareness of the sound and the sound are literally seamless. And you want it to be that way because it's so natural. It's so obvious. It's so real. It's so true. It's so intimate. It's so beautiful. It's finally reality. Like you're finally experiencing reality in the most direct way. There's more insight even beyond this, but it's about filtering a little bit more. It's almost like a psychological thing. The most fundamental sense of self in any respect at all. But the experience, let's say phenomenologically, of moment to moment presence is finally clear. You finally actually know unequivocally that this is real. This is how it actually is. And you can see how everything before, all the other iterations, like one mind and even before when it was just mind identification and thoughts, reflecting thoughts with barely a remnant of a dualistic experience of a sound somewhere down the chain. It's so unsatisfying. It's so distanced. This is full on. Yeah, this is what you want. I mean, this is non-dual realization. So I just want to be clear that the description is not non-dual realization, but if it can feel non-dualistic, it's non-dualistic. I will say this, and I've said this before, it's non-dualistic from the standpoint of consciousness itself. The first shift when we wake up, the first insight, Kensho, is essentially a shift from a very dualistic standing wave of thought of the thinker and the thought that feels very dualistic. It feels very numb in a way, distanced, and constantly threatened. It's very uncomfortable, and there's tons of doubt. And it's a constant trying to identify with and stabilize an identity in thought itself. That's super uncomfortable and it's very dualistic. When that collapses into this experience of just expansiveness, consciousness itself, it's wonderful. And you can want to conclude that that's the final position. That's fine. And you should, for some time, just rest in that. And I always tell people, just rest in it. There's nothing more to know here. Just rest in that. Once you get acclimatized, once you start to really feel into the subtlety of that, and then, the other things that come with it, with some shadow material is going to come up because, you were using, whether you knew it or not, you were using those apparent boundaries to avoid sensation and so forth and emotion. It's going to come up, and that's okay. But once that has started, you start to acclimatize to all that, then you will at some point start to sense deeper insights, and you'll start to look around. And if you really don't want to, that's fine. I mean, if you're really resistant to it, that's fine. It's your choice, of course. However, I would suggest there may be some shadow material that's holding you up. There's something you may not want to fully see. That's just my experience with myself and others. So hopefully that's helpful. And this isn't all directed at the commenter. There are many, many people who their insight is very clear this way. And again, it's a stage. You're in a small percentage of people in the world that actually have realized this, but there's more. And that's the beauty of this whole thing. There's always more. Isn't that wonderful? There's always more. So that's all. Let me know how that landed.